Okay, so a lot has been going on in the NBA lately, a lot of free agency signings, trades. Of course, we had the Durant and Kyrie Irving drama, and I'm going to be getting to all that in other videos. I've just been pushing it back a little bit because I'm like, hey, more moves are being made. Let me wait till tomorrow. Or then I'm about to record a video about it, and then Rudy Gobert gets traded. So I'm like, all right, let me wait till the next day. But at this point, I think a lot of the moves have been made, and there's only a few more things that are probably going to happen during the course of the off season. So the video's coming real soon. But before we get into that, we got to go over the draft, man. We got to do a draft recap. I've been tweeting a little bit here and there about some of these players, and I just wanted to put a video out there and give you guys my perspective on some of the things that went on draft night. So let's start at the top, man. The Orlando Magic drafted Paolo at number 1. I love the pick just because I feel like Paolo is a sure thing. Paolo is a guy, we've seen Paolo's before. Paolo could end up being Julius Randle. He could end up being Chris Webber. He's a guy who he's going to get 20 points per game in his career. He's going to have some 20-point per game seasons in the league. He might not end up being the best player in this draft. He could be the best player in this draft, but he's just a guy who you know what you're getting out of Paolo. He's not the quickest guy in this draft. He's not the biggest guy or whatever, but at 6'10 with a perimeter game, there's a lot of things he can do on the court, and he's just ready to get buckets right now. I think Paolo's a guy who can come in and just help Orlando with some scoring. So with Chet being someone who has a lot of upside, but there is a possibility that Chet could be a flop. I felt like Orlando took the safer route by taking Paolo Banchero, which leads me to number 2, Chet going to OKC. He's either going to have to knock down the 3 ball at a high clip so he can play power forward, or he's going to have to gain some size to play the 5. And I think the 4 is probably better off for him if he could be like what Porzingis was. I'm trying to think other guys that have played that role, like a power forward who's very long, kind of like KD when he was on the Warriors, where, I'm not comparing KD to Chet in any way, but where KD was like the shot blocker while Draymond was like the sturdy center covering the middle. But KD was like the longer guy playing help side defense coming with the blocks. That's kind of the role that I see Chet playing on the defensive end. He's going to be a power forward who comes through with a lot of help defense, adds a lot of length, fills up the lanes, makes it hard to drive and attack the basket, can come out and help. He's just going to be a great help defender in the NBA. And I think what OKC is doing with adding both the Williams brothers and adding Dieng, they're stacking up length, and they'll be a nightmare defensive team for years to come. They're probably going to have to replace SGA with another scorer when the time is right, or they're just going to have to go get a go-to scorer because there's been a lot of trading rumors about SGA, and his clock, he's not really on the same clock that the rest of these young guys are on. He's kind of coming into his prime, and he's probably going to want to go play for a contender, or he's just not in their long-term picture. So I'm interested to see what they do with that. But overall, I like what OKC is doing. There's just a lot of guys on their roster that could end up being matchup nightmares. So let's go to number 3, the Rockets drafting Jabari Smith. Jabari Smith gives me some concerns because he gets pushed out of his spot and sometimes struggles to get to where he wants to on the court. I like him even at his worst as a spot-up shooter and plus defender and rebounder. I love Ty as a playmaker, who the Rockets also got. And I love Ty in the pick and roll, and I love his shooting touch. I think he will eventually develop a nice 3-ball, but right now he's really good with the floaters, really good with the mid-range. I think people's concern with Ty is that he's not the most explosive, but he just has such a good feel for the game, and I think he knows pace that he's going to have, he'll be able to have success speeding the game up and slowing it down and picking his spots. So I like Ty, and overall Ty and Jabari, I think even a guy like Tari Eason could be a good 3-and-D guy for them. So overall, the Rockets made some good pickups. Some other notes outside of the top 3 teams, Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren to Detroit probably makes them the biggest winners in this draft. I think the backcourt is going to be amazing with 2 guys that can dominate in the pick and roll when you talk about Jaden Ivey going downhill and Cade Cunningham just being a maestro. If they get Bridges or Aiden, I think that's great pieces to add to this young group. But it looks like they're not even going for these guys right now because they get Bagley the bag. And, no pun intended, they get Bagley the bag. And we'll see how that works out for them. I think this is a team that knows that they're still young and that they're still, developing and figuring it out. So why just throw big money at a guy and try to force their way into the play-in tournament this year prematurely when they can just develop as a group. And if they end up being the 10th seed and getting into the play-in, then that's great, but there's no rush. These guys are young and they're still making it happen. And going off of Detroit, that leads me to the Blazers, who Detroit traded Jeremy Grant to Portland. And the Blazers now hiring Mike Smith and taking Shaedon Sharpe draws my attention because he's the draft guru and Sharpe is a high ceiling guy. You know, we saw potential. We saw potential in Sharpe. We haven't got to see a lot of film, but in the film that we have seen, I mean, the guy looks like Bradley Beal out there, you know? I mean, I'm not trying to get, too far carried away with it, but there's a reason why he got drafted so early in the draft. It's because he has the potential to end up being like a big-time scorer, a big-time playmaker in this league. So we'll have to keep an eye out on that. I like what Portland is doing. I'm going to talk about Portland a lot in the video that I do about free agency. I got some things that I want to get into with them, a couple ideas that I have about their squad. But right now, when you look at Dame Lillard, Anthony Simons, they got Jeremy Grant. Now you're talking GP2 signed over there. So they got some pieces over there. They just gave Nurkic an extension. So adding Sharpe to this group is like he could get some playing time, but he's not going to be expected to carry this group. He could learn under Dame and under Anthony. So it's the perfect situation for a young guard to get into. Now, later on in the draft, Miami ended up getting Nikola Jovic, and he's another one that draws my attention. So it's hard to make a decision on these foreign players because sometimes they end up being big busts, and you always, like, I know at least with me, I sometimes get wary about getting too excited about these overseas players because you don't know how they're going to end up turning out. Like, you don't know, like, it's just a different level of competition that they're playing out there. Sometimes they're playing in leagues against high competition, and sometimes you're kind of like, I'm not sure if this really translates over. But Nikola Jovic, he has a lot of potential. I mean, this guy, like, compared to a lot of European players, he's very athletic. Like, he's a slasher, he cuts, he gets to the rim. So there's a lot of things that he can do with the ball, on and off the ball. So the Heat took him with the number 27 overall pick. And with the number 28 overall pick, the Warriors drafted Patrick Baldwin Jr. And some will say that the rich just got richer. We've seen how Harrison Barnes and Wiggins have both looked in that wing role for the Dubs. I'm not going to add KD to that list because what he did in that role was on a whole nother level. But you guys get my point. Barnes and Wiggins could both defend and they both move well. Patrick Baldwin Jr. on the other end, he's slower and he hasn't played winning basketball. The knocks on him are that he's a ball hog. Doesn't play defense. He's not a great passer. Kind of has a low motor. Isn't the most hardworking player. But if there's one team that could take those intangibles and flip it around and turn all those things into pluses, it's the Golden State Warriors. We've seen them do it before. So he's also a coach's son. So maybe he's just like, it could go both ways. Maybe he's just a spoiled brat, and those things that I mentioned in a negative way just are what they are. Or maybe he knows what to do if he's put in the right scenario, because he has shown that he does have a high basketball IQ when he's out there on the court. He does make good reads at times. So this is what the Dubs do, is they draft guys who are highly touted, just like Looney was. Patrick Baldwin was a guy who in high school, before the injuries and stuff, he was considered a top 10 guy in this draft. So, they're definitely betting on upside. I could see Patrick Baldwin end up being a guy who's like a stretch four, a guy who, like, I'm thinking Danilo Gallinari, a guy who can hit mid-range jumpers and open three-point jumpers in the corner or the wing, pick and pop scenarios, a guy who could be a screener, just different things like that. I see him being a guy who the Warriors can run dribble handoffs similar to how they do it with Looney and Draymond, things like that. I don't necessarily see him being a guy who isolates on the wing and is just doing like step backs and creating space and getting up his own shot. Maybe he'll end up being one of those guys in the league. Maybe we'll see some of that at times from him. But I just think he's kind of slow, and I'm not expecting, with him being slow-footed, I'm not really expecting him in NBA game speed to be able to get those moves off. But I could be wrong. He could end up being a guy who, is just so crafty that he creates space and gets his shot off. They drafted a guy at the end of the draft. I believe his name is Gui Santos. If I'm pronouncing the first name wrong, don't kill me. But last name Santos, from Brazil. His dad played professionally in the NBA for a few years. He's a very crafty player. I watched him in the summer league. He's a very crafty player, or not the summer league, but the California Classic at Chase. I watched him, and he's very crafty, and he goes downhill and he can make plays off the pick and roll. So it'll be interesting to see. These are very raw prospects that the Warriors picked up. Ryan Rollins, people were talking about CJ McCollum. I think you got to slow your horses with that. I like the comparison, but you got to slow your horses with that. Ryan Rollins has a lot more to go before we can just, throw out a name like CJ McCollum next to him, but he got some game. He's definitely a guy who can create in the mid-range. So what the Warriors did was they took a couple chances, they took a couple swings, and they're in a position to do so. They have young guys coming up like Kuminga and Poole and Wiseman, Moody. So why not take a swing at more young guys and see if you could just have a stacked roster of young guys ready to ball out once Steph, Clay, and Draymond hang them up. So we'll see how it goes. Got to keep an eye on the Dubs. Charlotte was able to get Mark Williams. I thought that was a solid pickup, a nice rim roller, a guy who can get some rebounds. The video of him talking to Michael Jordan was pretty cool, I'm not going to lie. MJ calling him and asking him if he's ready to get into the gym. That's just pretty dope. You got Michael Jordan fucking calling you on draft night. Like, you getting, like, Michael Jordan's drafting you to play for his basketball team. That's just as cool as it gets. Lastly, I do love what the Pelicans did in the draft. They got two guys who fit the culture. Dyson Daniels and EJ Little will both defend at a high level and give tremendous effort. With guys like Herb Jones, Ingram, Little, Dyson, and Larry Nance, you can run some crazy lineups defensively. There's just so much length and athleticism with that group. Tons of switching. Not to mention you got Grand Theft Alvarado being a pest. And if you keep Zion, and they just re-signed him, and unless some trade goes down or something crazy, you know how the NBA is. But as long as you keep Zion, and he's just being a tank and he's being a monster and just a matchup nightmare, you combine that with all the length and like different things that they can do defensively and on the glass, and then you have a perimeter scorer like CJ and Ingram's making plays. It's a lot that they can do. I think Dyson Daniels can end up being a guy in the NBA who's a playmaker as well. I wouldn't just limit him to just being a defensive guy, but he's going to be very good on the defensive end. And I think New Orleans is, gearing themselves up to be really, really successful, if not this season, because the West is very stacked, in a couple years. Like, New Orleans is going to be a team that we talk about in the West for years to come. So overall, this draft was very interesting. A couple things I didn't mention. Keegan Murray going forward to Sacramento. A lot of people were mad about that pick. I thought Sacramento probably should have taken Jaden Ivey, but Keegan Murray probably fits that Sacramento culture a little bit more. Jaden Ivey had no interest in going to Sacramento. So if you get Keegan Murray and he's happy to be there, and he's a guy who kind of reminds me of Pascal Siakam. He has such a good feel for the game. He can kind of get into the painted area, kind of get into the mid-range and rise over guys, or just floaters, crafty up and unders, things of that sort, a little bit of post game. He has some size on him. So overall, I thought this was a good draft. My favorite player, who I didn't even mention in this recap video yet, shame on me, is Ben Math, who got picked up by the Pacers out of Arizona. He's a sharpshooter. He's a guy who can come off screens. I see him coming off screens and being able to make dump-off passes to the big man coming off of those screens, or if you don't come around quick enough, he's just going to pull up and light it up. But I suspect that he's going to be coming off those screens, knocking shots down, and the defense is going to have to trap him when he comes off those screens or hedge a little bit. And he's such a good playmaker that he can make those little drop-off passes. He can come around the screen and curl and attack the basket and make crafty plays. Like, this is the guy who I see being really good on ball and off ball. When you combine him with Halliburton, and they're both 6'5", it gives them a lot of versatility out there on that perimeter, offensively and defensively. I mean, that's what this league is all about. When you look at this draft, and this is my last point, is there were only like 3 guys in this draft who were under 6'4" and got drafted. Like, guys who were like 6'3" or under. Like, everybody in this draft was like 6'6" and up. I mean, this is a league now where you got to be able to guard multiple positions. You have to be able to pass the basketball. There's so many good passers in this draft. You have to be able to switch on to multiple guys. You got to provide good ball movement and not be a ball stopper. You got to be able to make open shots. That's what this league has come down to. It's very analytical, and people would just have to catch up with the times. If you're going to be a 6-foot guard trying to play in the NBA, good luck. I mean, really the only guy doing it is fucking Trae Young, and at about 5'11", Trae Young led the NBA in total points/assists. So, he's in a position where he has to be so productive on the offensive end because he's so damn big, so damn little, that he just has to be productive on the offensive end because they will hunt him on the defensive end. So, that's just what the league has come down to. It's the modern day NBA, and it was just really interesting to see it unfold in this draft. I thought this draft was just the culmination of everything that's been going on in the NBA the past couple years, and you really saw it in the players and the type of players that were getting picked and the order that they were getting picked in. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these players turn out, to see how like a Chet Holmgren turns out in the NBA. Yeah, it's always fun talking draft talk and seeing how these guys develop as players going forward. But I can't wait to watch it. Summer League is going to be interesting. I'm going to try to make it out there to Summer League for at least a day or two, catch some of these guys play live. But anyways, that's it on that. Like I said, guys, more videos coming soon. Going to get into free agency and the Kevin Durant frenzy and all that stuff going on. But thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it all. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. And until next time, peace.